Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a senior civil servant from India who selected to serve in the social sector from Gurgaon, India, Ratna Vishwanathan. Ratna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Ratna is the Chief Executive Officer of Reach to Teach. She's also a 1987 batch civil servant from the Indian Audit and Accounts Service. So, my first question for you, Ratna, which I'm sure you've been asked many times, what inspired you to transition from the Indian Audit and Accounts Service?
Well, actually, Ashutosh, I was typically literally an accidental civil servant.
Okay.
I studied English literature. I had no idea what I wanted to do post that. And I was in Lucknow at that time, and my friends were filling in forms. And Lucknow was not very up on the grid in terms of civil service. We didn't realize there were things like Rao Study Circle, ABC, nothing. So
Hmm.
just a bunch of friends. And since they were filling in the form, they said, you also fill in the form.
Hmm.
And, so I filled in the form just for the heck of it. And then five of us sat and we actually started, like you do quizzes with each other. Started doing that for the prelims. And the funny part was I was least interested and
Hmm.
was doing it because I love trivia and I like being able
Hmm.
to answer questions when people ask you questions. I made it, I cleared the prelims.
Amazing.
So then after that, I said, like, look, this has happened. So it means I need to give it a good shot. You can't trivialize something.
Correct.
It was good luck it happened, but then one had to make the effort. So of course I put in the effort and I actually got selected for the police. And my father said, you are outspoken, you never back down, you will express your opinion no matter what. So a good service for you. And also I suffer from something else. No, it's called a bleeding kind heart. So
Mm-hmm.
he says all of these are absolutely no-nos to join the police. So then I have a few civil servants in the family. So they all kind of, consulted each other and they said Indian audit and accounts is very good because A, it doesn't report to a minister. It has a constitutional authority as the head. It's a small, very well managed service. It only serves out of state capitals. So I said, fine, because I really had no opinion on any of this.
Amazing.
And so I joined the audit and account service, and I can say very, very fairly, I had a good time
Hmm.
while I was in the service.
Hmm.
And, I am not one of the people who trash the civil services because I think the way you learn, the magnitude at which you learn, and the things you learn, the best B schools, nobody can give you that exposure and that learning. You deal with hordes of people who neither you can fire nor incentivize.
Hmm.
Learning man management that way, or sorry, person management
Hmm.
that way is very, very, I mean, it's hands on.
Correct.
What you learn through instinct is amazing. And then
Right.
also get a ringside view of the government, how it functions, all of it. And I keep saying this all the time. It's easy to criticize the government because they're the largest front-facing agency in the country. The corporate sector, the not-for-profit sector, we are not actually front-facing.
Correct. Correct.
But having said that, like every bureaucrat, I had this rose-tinted dream of joining the development sector.
Mm, mm,
And, when I finished about 21 years, Oxfam was Indianizing and they were creating a single Oxfam India. So a headhunter reached out and she said they're looking for a person with a operations background. And are you interested? And like I said, lovely, perfect timing. I'd finished 21 years. And I said, why not? Let's take a chance.
mm.
And so she said, okay, send me your CV. I said, we don't do CVs in the civil sector.
Yes. Yes.
So she then, she was really sweet. She asked me 20 questions and made my first CV. So I'm
Amazing.
eternally grateful to her for
Mm,
that. So I went to the interview, and for me, it was like a chat because after that UPSC interview, you don't do interviews. And, I don't think anyone was more surprised than me when I got the job.
mm,
But having said that, I was so glad to transition because you have a choice of, going on secondment. for about 5 to 7 years and getting back to the service. And I said to myself that if I do that, I will always have at the back of my mind the safety net that, oh, I can go back.
Mm.
So if I have to get in here, I have to give it 100%. So I didn't opt for that at all. I just quit.
Mm.
And of course, I've been called all kinds of names, including psycho, you crack, what are you doing? But, I think once you decide to do
Correct.
something,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
uh, I have not regretted a moment of it. And I really felt that was the only way to be able to reach people in a manner much closer
Mm.
than you were when you were a civil servant. Because as a civil servant, of course, there's people interaction, but it's policy. You're looking at different systems. You're not really touching lives in the way you one removed.
Mm.
So for me, this was a great opportunity, and I think Oxfam was a great place to learn because being one of the oldest international NGOs in terms of people, in terms of processes, in terms of ethics, in terms of how you manage trust, respect,
Yeah,
all of that, it was a great learning ground.
absolutely. Absolutely. So let's now come to Reach to Teach. Tell me a little bit about Reach to Teach. What is your core mission? And how do you differentiate yourself from so many other NGOs which are focused on education?
Well, Reach to Teach, I joined it. It was a UK-based charity, and it was actually headquartered in London, but all the work was happening in India. So in 2020, they decided actually 2019, they decided that since all the work was happening in India, let's move operations to India and hire an Indian CEO. At that time, so I'll tell you a little bit. So Oxfam, microfinance, UN. So I've traversed many worlds.
Mhm.
At that point, I was with UNDP, and they reached out to me saying that, they're looking for a CEO, an Indian CEO, and would you be interested? I resisted for 3 months because
Mhm.
I'm like, I've never worked in this area before. But the one thing civil services teaches you is you learn.
Mm.
You hit the ground and start running from day one because you're always doing different things.
Mm.
So I said, all right, let's take a shot at this because I like setting up systems
Mm.
and I like setting up processes. And the fact that we were Indianizing and I could build a new strategy, all of that was fascinating.
Mm. Mm.
I joined, and that's how Reach to Teach India, became an independent entity. And so, yes, that is my story around how I joined Reach to Teach. As to your question about how do you think we are different and how we hope to achieve our mission, I think what we do, Asutosh, is we approach the problem from three angles: system, scale, sustainability. And long ago, I realized scaling up is very different from designing for scale.
Mm.
Pockets of excellence, when you scale up,
Mhm.
you don't account for a lot of imponderables.
Right.
You really need, when you design for scale, which is a different
Sure.
construct together.
Sure.
And so that's what we decided we'd do because from 2007 to 19, we were working in the field in Gujarat. So there was an enormous amount of learning
Mm.
on how government schools work on ground. What are the problems children face? What are the infrastructure problems? What problems children face? And so we decided, let's take all this learning and now work directly with the government at systems level. And people keep asking me, with such a small team, how have you managed scale? It's very simple. The first, I think the most important criteria is government should trust you and let you into the system.
Mm.
The moment you become embedded, you use government infrastructure, government people, and the system to drive the designs that you have created on learning.
Mm.
The two things that happen is it gets, rolled out across every school in the state, number one.
Mm.
Your governors and ambassadors are from within the government itself. And because it becomes embedded in the system, it becomes sustainable.
Mm.
And I think that's what sets us apart. The fact that we integrate and truly collaborate and co-create with the government
Mm.
with extensive consultation from,
Right.
with everyone,
Mm.
teachers, functionaries, officers, everybody.
Very interesting. You you were just talking about build everything to scale, and you work with over 8.2 million children. What have been the biggest enablers of this scale?
The biggest enabler has been acceptance by government.
Hmm.
Unless you become embedded with the government, you will never be able to reach the scale, because then you can do 100 schools or you can do 200 schools. But so what we did is we transitioned from hands-on implementation to creating tools.
Hmm.
So we create tools, we create textbooks, we create frameworks, all of it, which then gets rolled out by the government across every school.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. For instance, in Arunachal Pradesh,
Right.
they actually, they have the CBSE board.
Yeah.
What we did was we realized that the northeastern states are very low on all the national learning indices.
Hmm.
So we took that on as a challenge and we voluntarily said we want to work in the northeast. So in Arunachal, we realized that there was a lot of learning loss that was happening.
Mhm.
And we so we did a grade level assessment on our own. My
Hmm.
team went. We didn't get consultants, nobody, hands on. And we realized that, a eighth standard child couldn't do a third standard maths problem. So once we did assess this loss, we took the same CBSE textbooks and created activities in maths and language and science and social studies.
Hmm.
And these activities were not random. They were
Hmm.
linked to the learning loss we had identified, number one. Number two, they were linked to nationally specified learning outcomes by the NCRT. Now, how did we manage to roll it out across 3,000 schools?
Hmm.
We wrote student worksheets, which were competency-based worksheets, not mug and
Mhm.
respond.
Hmm.
But we also wrote very, very detailed teacher handbooks
Hmm.
so that each activity was rolled out in exactly the same way across the 3,000 schools.
Hmm.
And then to support them, we have a project management unit within the state. We also have a helpline. And since internet connectivity is an issue, it's a telephone helpline. They call you, you respond within 24 hours, you are there, you're holding hands, you're supporting them. And I think what was critical was the recognition of the fact that the government teacher is actually an apathetic person because the system has made them invisible over the years.
Hmm.
The moment you consulted, the moment you took their feedback into whatever activities and books, etc., that you're creating, there was a level of ownership and interest. And I think bringing activity into play brought an element of interactiveness
Hmm.
between the child and the teacher
Hmm.
instead of somebody reading and children kicking each other under the table.
Hmm.
And we produce great results, Asutosh. The national performance, I mean the state performance in the 10th grade went up by 10% and the 12th grade by 12%. And in the SDG index, they have moved from an aspirant in education to now a performer, right? So you can do it. So this is how we use the scale.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You also speak about joyful learning. And therefore, my question is, how do you handle academic rigor with play-based learning and curiosity?
Exactly like I told you, by introducing activity and experiential modules into regular lessons,
Hmm.
you're actually creating play-based
Hmm.
learning. Play is not toys. Play
Hmm.
is not only going out into the field. Play is a state of mind,
Correct.
right? It has to be interesting. It has to arouse enthusiasm. It has to arouse curiosity. And yet, because it's embedded into the syllabus, it's embedded into whatever the board wants you to do,
Hmm.
you are getting the rigor
Right.
through a process of interactive play.
Hmm. Fascinating. So, in an age of digital transformation, and there's so much has changed in the last few years, how is Reach to Teach leveraging technology in education?
See, I'll tell you one thing. The thing with government schools is, for instance, the urban states that we work in, very, very urban states that we work in, Gujarat and Haryana, excellent internet connectivity.
Hmm.
And a large number of schools also have computer labs, access to computers, all of that. But where the shortage lies is in people who are actually trained to be able to use these digital equipment, digital means to teach children about them, to teach children how to use them. Having said that, there are a lot of government schools which do this very well. It's not that they don't. But for us, because we work across a spectrum of schools,
mm,
what we try to do is, and in my opinion, and I could be completely wrong, I feel a lot of ed tech is supply driven,
mm,
especially when you're looking at the public school scenario in a country like India,
mm,
a lot of edtech is supply driven. So, whereas that 15% of very high end schools
mm,
can actually absorb, use, utilize, make individual learning plans,
mm,
tailored to children's needs. When you're looking at a mass, you have to look at where to use this technology.
mm,
Now, if I don't have internet connectivity, let's say in a state like Arunachal, how do I use it? I use it to create, the activities that we create for the books that we're writing. You use now with AI coming in, you give it the data points. Whereas previously it was the tedious job of you creating those activities.
mm,
AI helps you generate that, and now your time is spent more usefully in seeing how much of that works, what you need to change, things like that. So I think it's a gradual process. And I think technology, particularly in government schools, will come in at the moment. People like us, we will use it to sharpen, what we're doing, sharpen our tools, sharpen the things that we are creating, the frameworks we are creating. We
mm,
create accreditation frameworks, for instance. It's
mm.
an online tool,
Right.
right? And it takes a head teacher only 45 minutes to use it,
Mm,
but gives you the entire, ecosystem that is within a school: infrastructure, teaching and learning, safety, security, all of that. 45 minutes, that's all. It's a tool with 163 questions, right? So I think using technology smartly, depending on the environment in which you are functioning,
mm,
and using it most efficiently and effectively, I don't think there's a universal response to
mm.
this.
Well said. The other aspect I'm curious about is, that in a country like ours, which has got so many different languages and cultures, how do you integrate local languages and cultural context into your learning materials?
For instance, where we're writing the textbooks, we use local examples.
Okay.
Like for the activities,
Mm,
for the experiential based elements, we use local examples, local flora, local fauna,
mm,
local heroes,
right.
so that children relate to that.
Mm,
And believe me, each state is different. What I'm writing in Arunachal will not be what I'm writing in Meghalaya,
okay.
because everybody thinks the Northeast is a homogeneous body. It is not. They're all very different. And I think India is so complex that no
Correct.
one state is like the other.
Mm,
And even within states, you have geographies that have different,
correct.
kind of aspects to them. So we actually use that. And it's not complicated. You talk to teachers. And that's why it's so important to have teachers as an integral part of this process.
Mm,
And language is not really a challenge, Shutosh. Like, for instance, material that we create in Gujarat, we get it translated into Gujarati because the
mm,
schools use Gujarati up to a certain level.
mm.
But Arunachal English and Hindi, because it's the only northeastern state that speaks Hindi.
Okay.
Right?
Mm,
Yes. And then Meghalaya again, it's English. So it depends on the states. Haryana is Hindi.
mm,
So you have to translate whatever you're doing, and not transliterate,
mm.
but translate with the spirit and the
Correct.
essence,
Correct.
so that it is relevant to the state.
Very interesting. What are some of the biggest training gaps you have observed among teachers, especially in the low resource schools?
You see, what has happened is the National Education Policy 2020 has mandated
Mm,
50 hours of training, both for head teachers and teachers.
mm,
So training happens, but training happens within the overall umbrella of whatever is the syllabus, whatever is the curriculum,
mm,
that has been, whether it's a state board or whether it's a central board, right? I think the gap lies, there are two things. One, we are not consulting teachers
mm,
about what it is that they think they want to learn.
mm,
Where do they find that they want to be trained?
mm,
What is new that they want to understand?
mm,
We assume this is the curriculum, this is the syllabus, this is the training you need.
mm.
On the other hand, like for instance, what we're doing now, because we've created this entire ecosystem of textbooks, student worksheets, teacher handbook, we very specifically train teachers in the use of this material, right? And the way we train them is through extensive consultation. First, we ask.
Mm.
Because I think whoever it is, Ashutosh, unless you ask, I don't think we can presume to know what somebody else wants. My favorite story is if I'm a poor person and I need a shirt and I need a pair of shoes, but my shoes are the priority. But if you decide you want to give me a shirt, I'll take the shirt because I need it.
Correct.
But are you asking me what my priority is? Because if you do, then I'll tell you I need the shoes more than the shirt.
Mm.
Right. So I think consulting is the biggest gap. Teacher agency, particularly in low resource schools, teachers have to feel they are needed. And once they feel they are needed, once they become an integral part of the consultative process, I think even within communities, respect for teaching as a profession will go up because they will once again start being seen as important players within the social ecosystem.
Very interesting. I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is, what role do parents and communities play in ensuring the success of Reach to Teach?
I think one of the most important factors for getting children into school from low income households is engaging with parents. You cannot force children into school. The parent would have to want to enroll the child in school, despite the RT saying that it is free, because there is a tendency, especially in low income households, to get children in as a part of the economic sustenance to the household, right? So it is really important to first engage. There are two aspects to this, Ashutosh. One, of course, engaging with parents to make sure that the children come to school. The other is involving parents in the child's learning process. Our assumption, there are two things. Our assumption is that children from low income households, the parents are not literate, but they have skills. If
Correct.
I'm a farmer, I have skills. If I'm a weaver, I have skills. And now these are skills that you will not get usually. So we try and encourage one parent to come into a classroom and tell all the children in that classroom about what he or she is doing. It gives the child a sense of pride. B, I think it gets an understanding within children as to what their parents are doing. Three, first generation learners tend to believe their parents are illiterate. We want to break that and we want to make sure they respect their parents
Yeah.
and not think they're illiterate. So parents are a key, part of the ecosystem. And
Mm.
we have activities where we involve them, which doesn't, necessarily have to be reading and doing things. It's
Mm.
also activity based. It's also play based.
Very interesting. And my last question for you, Ratna. I've spoken to a lot of people on the national education policy, and I believe it's quite a game changer, very forward looking, etc. My question to you is, if you could change one thing in the Indian education system, what would it be and why?
I think if I were asked to, look at education today, I think what is critical is giving choices to children.
Mm.
Whereas the national education policy, it's a beautifully written document.
Right.
But there are a large parts of that policy which, you have to actually bring down into executable, doable pieces. It envisages children learning through choice. It envisages children picking up subjects they feel interested in. We have a long way together, Asutosh, because we are stuck with a framework of examinations where pedagogy is driven by the marks a
Mm.
child gets.
Mm.
And it is not the government only responsible, it is not the teacher only responsible. There's a bunch of manic parents out there who's sitting on that teacher's head saying,
Correct.
I want my child to get 100%. So
Absolutely.
unless there is a change in thinking in all, the entire ecosystem that surrounds the child,
Mm.
we will not be able to get what we have envisaged in the national education policy. And that is what I would want more than anything else, the change in mindset.
Amazing. You know, and I just want to say on that note, And as you were talking, I was thinking I finished school in 1972. And even those days, parents used to say doctor, lawyer, engineer. If you're very bright, you could become someone like Ratna in the
Oh
UP.
my God.
But it's unfortunate that we are still talking of giving choices to children. I mean, 52 years later, we still are driven by marks, etc. But I do want to say, Ratna, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. A lot of people talk about making this choice and move to the social sector or the development sector. You're one person who has done it. We covered a lot of ground on Reach to Teach. I did some reading up about Reach to Teach before my conversation. We spoke about your mission. We spoke about the scale that you're working at, 8.2 million children. We spoke about joyful learning, play-based learning. We spoke a little bit about technology, culture, and the role of parents and communities. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.